And welcome, everybody. We will give another minute for folks to come in. Good to see you, Carrie. Oh, and Mike Rochelle in an empty chair. Frederica, twice in one
Sorry
day.
about that. Sorry about that.
All right, good to see you. Hi, Lori and Lori, both.
Hi,
One
team. How's
Toronto. It's
everybody
been too
doing? Good to
long.
see everybody.
Yeah.
of my favorite things about this that we're doing this year is the opportunity to spend lovely time with people I enjoy and respect, and that you are appreciating a time to come together and talk about being generative more and
Back
in
at
some
at
unusual
you
way.
all, very much so. I'm so glad we get to do this. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad. Welcome, welcome, Shannon and Alejandra. And I like to wait until 2 minutes after the hour just to let everybody kind of get through. Oh, I didn't do my Zoom update. Have you heard that many times? I know I certainly have. Yes, indeed. And I have a little question for you, those of you that are here earlier. One of the things that Hamad and I noticed was the word codex might have been a little flummoxing for people. So if that was true for you, you don't have to raise your hand. It's okay. But it would be fun for you to think about, what did you think it meant? And since you got here, what about it was intriguing? So, take a moment in chat to tell us where you're coming from and how did Codex land for you? Hi, Layla. Welcome. Terry, good to see you. Welcome, Jackie. Hi, Lynn. Good to see you too. I learned about Codex from my 10-year-old twin grandsons. Just think about that for a second. Because what I'm going to show you is it's actually ancient. Codex comes from the historical ancestor format of the modern book. So it's been around a really long time. Now I'm taking the time to give you this geeky thing, not because Rachel Maddow does it on her shows all the time, and I love that she does that, but mostly because I want you to realize there really isn't anything new under the sun except us and the moment that we're standing in. The same is true about collaboration. It's not new. We've always said collaboration was a good thing, but our context is very different today. Codex today is the future format of AI generated code. And my 10-year-old twins are writing programs using a codex. That's extraordinary. I wouldn't know where to start. Our version of it, of course, those of us that are born before 1990, we would have learned something called C or Fortran. And this was the early beginnings. Anybody remember punch cards? No, maybe you don't want to say that because then you would know how old you are. Well, that came from Bell Labs. And while I was preparing for putting some context around our discussion today on the collaboration codex, I came across a really cool article, which is in that hyperlink, and you guys will all get the slides, so you can go dig into this yourselves. But Bell Labs started in 1925. And I thought you'd find this kind of interesting. Of course, it was the invention of the phone. But before that, in 1857, a man named Edward Leon Scott was rewarded a patent for a device that he designed that could record sound. It was called a phone autograph. Thomas Edison then picks it up a little bit later, and he's the one who actually invents the phonograph before he invents electricity. He imagined that it would regularly be used as a means of sending audio letters through the postal system. Bell, in inventing the telephone, made what was effectively a mirror image miscalculation. He thought the primary use would be as a medium for sharing live music. That, of course, doesn't come until another 40 years later when we have radio airwaves. Now, what did that do? Those radio airwaves gave access to multiracial music, multicultural music to every race on the planet. Quite interesting now, if you think about that as a sociology experiment. Now, why am I talking about all of this? Because, of course, the reason collaboration is so important in organizations today is that we see it as the answer to meeting the complexity and the multiplicity that is modern business. No one person can see everything. No one person can understand all of what is occurring. And that means we have to learn how to engage each other and to collect input and to do the synthesis and synergy necessary to make better decisions because we've taken into account more of our context. So, what we thought we'd do today is talk a little bit about, well, how come it's so bloody hard? Why have we been talking about collaboration since I'm going to show you? 1959, the year I was born, researchers did the first documentation on the importance of collaboration. One of those things is about how do we harmonize competition, which often is seen as an or to collaboration and too expensive to not have. What is intentional collaboration? We're going to give you some time to play with it. We have something called a Generative Leaders Playbook. We're also going to have a panel that's going to talk about how we have seen this emerge with our own clients, leaders in all kinds of industries and size of organizations all across the planet. And of course, give you some time to think about how will you choose to incorporate what we covered today in this workshop. So welcome here. And I'm going to stop share for a moment so I can cut over here and see what you said in chat. Yes, messaging and discussing leadership challenges. Ooh, won't that be fun? Maybe we have a leadership codex coming. That would be very interesting. Medieval art world. Layla, really? Very interesting. Oh, you might have to go find a picture for us to share with everybody. Very intriguing. Um, Thank you, Carrie, that I would have a meaningful reason for using it.
Hmm.
That's fun. All right, great. So it's a way, actually, all of us use language as a way to break the pattern. We all have our habits and preferences. And until we come up against something that causes us to pause and go, huh, I wonder what that is, it doesn't occur to us to pay attention to do something different. That's called internal coherence. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it is the reason why change plans that get written all the time don't actually get implemented. We don't take the time to do the communicating necessary to help people find their coherence before we tell them, but you have to do this. So let's look at what you told us. Thank you to all of you who spent a bit of time and answered the survey that we sent out. And if you haven't done it yet, it's not too late. It would be fun to have your answers. But here's some of what you said. In the question, what are the biggest challenges that you find in your leadership? These were the top three. What was fascinating to me was the majority of you talked about communication breakdowns. Now, whether you're in the room as a leader, as a coach, or a leader who's a coach, or a coach who's a leader, it doesn't matter. Human beings have communication breakdowns. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And I think what's interesting is what the breakdowns produce. So the second and the third one were very intriguing to me. Teams lack accountability. All right. You know me, I'm always going to tell you what my bias is. I'm going to give you a 5-word definition of accountability to play around with in our 2 hours and later, if you are so inclined. Accountability is accepting responsibility. That's a behavior. Accepting responsibility for authority granted. So personalize this for a moment. You accept responsibility for the authority to have a robust, vital, loving, satisfying life. And you do that by the food you eat and how well you sleep and how well you hydrate and the friends and the life partner that you have every day. And all the things you do to stay alive, to be in the experience of being a human. It's just a simple thing. You are accountable for your life experience. Now, start to extend that out. You accept responsibility for the authority you have, some might say the privilege you have to choose your professional employment and to choose who you work for, to choose the company because it has values alignment, right? There are many ways in which this is operating and we take it for granted rather than recognizing being intentional about accountability is a game changer. And this is why collaboration can often feel forced and not natural. Not surprising to me that that was on the top list. What were the problems you wanted to eliminate? Well, three big lacks: a lack of trust, a lack of accountability, and a lack of transparency. Now I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say all three lacks are symptoms, not really what's going on. They're the label we give to what we're struggling with because we think if I could just get rid of those three things, if those lacks weren't there, everything would be fine. And it doesn't work like that. It's kind of like awareness. It's never a habit, it's a practice. Every moment it requires us to deliberately engage. Consistency and alignment gets a little bit closer, I think, to the heart of it. Aligned with what? And why would I want to align? Ah, there you can hear the need for the internal coherence coming up. And the third, which I thought was wonderful to see, team member self-doubt. Why did I think it was wonderful? Because it indicates that there's an acceptance that leaders have a big influence. We would call this workplace climate. Big influence every day, every week, every month on how people experience whether they have something to offer that people respect and value. And if you want to have that reciprocity of the employees feel like it's a fair exchange to be here because they're given opportunities to exercise their competence and they're acknowledged and valued for it consistently. In return, loyalty to the organization because we value the workplace that we're living in. Yes, I say living because we spend a third of our waking hours in our professional lives. So 2 and 3 begin to give you some idea about why one exists. Now, we asked you one more question that I thought was interesting, which is, what was the source of your greatest frustration? And I must confess, I will tell you a story about time when we get to the panel a little bit later. But time is an interesting phenomenon because it's a construct. We made it up. What if there wasn't any time at all? What if there was just the sunrise and the sunset when we had light, when we had dark, when we didn't worry about a clock? Well, it's not realistic. In order to navigate the complexity of our lives, time makes order out of things. And yet we make it the enemy. It's the reason we can't get done what we most long to do. It's the reason that we are disappointed when others don't live up to our expectations. One of you answered the survey as people who don't live up to my standard of excellence. Well, maybe you can hear there again the other pieces. I have self-doubt whether I can live into the expectation. The expectation doesn't seem to align with what my skills are. Am I really in the right job? You want me on this project team, but I don't understand why I'm on this project team and how am I going to get all my other stuff done while I'm on this team? These are all the invisible conversations that are happening on teams that leaders identify as not being accountable, and they might be missing something. If you want ambition because you feel that people are not ambitious enough, when's the last time you asked them about what they're inspired by, what they're motivated by, what they're longing for? It doesn't mean in every situation that this is going to be the ticket, but you can't even get to the conversation that might identify what would be sticky for someone to be ignited to be doing the work that they're doing if you're not in social connection with them. Which takes us right back to time because we think there isn't enough time to be connected. There's too much work to do. Oh, such a tension of presence. All right. So that's how you framed the problem. Let me see. Raise your hand if there's something on there. If you didn't do the survey, I want to just see. Raise your hand if there's something on there that you would like to fix. You would like to address, have some support, make it go away, mitigate it in some way at your organization. Oh, I'm getting nodded heads. You guys don't like raising your hands, really?
Carrie.
Carrie and Mike, that's awesome. Terrific. You know, Lori, there were some others, but the two that really rose to the top was time and ambition. And time is complex. You know, leaders don't generally get enough information, and this is very common with the leaders that I work with. They don't get enough information when projects are being funded, decisions are being made about allocation of money, dollars, and people. Money and dollars is the same, sorry, hours, dollars, and people. They don't get enough information and we overload. And when the people who are expected to do the work say, but I can't get it done on this timeline, there isn't any room for the negotiation. And then they wonder why people don't have ambition. So these are interwoven, unfortunately. And the common denominator is we're not in enough connection to see the whole picture and to do the work necessary to take into account what will help us navigate the multiplicity and the complexity. Now, that's a real problem to solve, don't you think? Yes, indeed. That is a reason why people leave companies. Because what it says is you don't value me enough. You don't respect my competence enough. By golly, you hired me, but you don't listen to me when I tell you what it takes to do a quality job. Yeah, there's always 15 or 20% wiggle room in any story that we listen to. Team members will say this, leaders will say that, and somewhere in the middle is the whole story. But generally, we have made time this thing that we compete with as opposed to using it as our ally. I won't be able to get to that today, but maybe that's a future master class. We'll come back around to it. And what did Michelle say here? Yes, exactly. All kinds of decisions get made for teams without ever explaining why did we even consider that idea? What's its relevance to what you told us were the strategic objectives for this year? I can't connect the dots. And if I can't connect the dots here, internal coherence, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not moving. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, keep my head down, try to stay out of trouble till somebody can explain it to me. And we label that as leaders as resistance or outright mutiny in some cases. And we miss the opportunity to say, yeah, I see the hesitance that you have, and I'm aware that I must not see the whole picture. What do you see that has you standing in hesitance? Because without that, if we don't learn by asking that question, we're just going to keep pushing instead of inspiration. Sorry, Steve, you gave me that. I had to put it in. All right, you'll hear his story. Hi, Zuli, welcome. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
So, why collaboration now? As I said in my opening remarks, it's been around forever. And I think now because not only because the context has changed, not the least of which is because of technology and how it's being deployed and its own evolution. But I think now because we're recognizing that the 8 billion people on the planet are all connected and what it takes to keep us in alignment and focused about our mutual responsibility for each of us having a vibrant, vital, robust, healthy life anywhere on the planet. It's a whole different ballgame. Oops, I didn't mean to go back there. Hold on a second. There we go. So leadership is evolving because of all of those forces. And here's what I think's going on. And not just me, but our entire team here at Invite Change that spends a lot of time sitting in organizations, listening to leaders and being with teams to help them navigate what feels like sometimes completely impossible odds. This is the first thing that comes up very regularly. Control-based models are failing. It's even perceptual contrast between a traditional, what's called the waterfall approach of project management. Some of you might be familiar with that, and what agile represents. They're not a thing to blend. They are completely foundationally different approaches. Agile being far less control oriented as compared with the waterfall process of a PMO. Well, what happens in control? We create mistrust, skepticism, and fear, and it tanks productivity. You'll see in most organizations that are in project-oriented org design that you have a lot of blame and finger painting, well, maybe finger pointing going on. The second thing we consistently see is that teams who do not have authority and autonomy stagnate. Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've been brought in to say, this team used to be so good. What happened? And I can tell you most of the time that ends up in a leadership coaching before I ever get to the team to say, yeah, what happened? When did the change? What was going on in the system? What did you introduce? How well was that change introduced to the system? How involved were the people that are now expected to implement it at the time you were making the decisions? Whose voice wasn't at the table? So what happens is that the team never really gets delegated ownership. And ultimately, in an effort to try to not make a mistake, consensus becomes unanimity, which is blocking decision making, often to the point where they're so far behind schedule on the project, it gets canceled. And then it's hard to get funding for the next time you want to do something. And the third is a passion of mine. Leaders who carry it all can't scale. I learned this the hard way. Boy, was I a one-arm paper hanger early on in my leadership career. And I kept looking over my shoulder going, but there's nobody there. Anybody that's an individual contributor at some point in your career knows what that feels like. So whether you're in that role or you have lots of teams around you, the minute you think that nobody on your team is capable, resourceful, and creative enough to get the job done, it will never occur to you to ask. And yet you'll hold the point of view that they're not ambitious enough and that they are unavailable to accept responsibility. Just might not be true. And what I've seen in my own work is that when we support leaders to prioritize connection, they create win-win-win solutions. When they don't, everyone fails, not just the leader, but everyone on the team and the organization that's relying on that departmental function to achieve. So this is what we do. I've been in this field of human development, oh gosh, 1996. And I brought coaching education into my portfolio in 2006 and love looking at the intersection between them. Managers and leaders, both, those are different roles, sometimes in the same body. They need very practical collaboration building tools. So if that's you, right, if you fit that description, we're going to give you some of those today. We want you to leave with that. But there's more where that came from. And helping executives understand the power of embedding a coaching climate and culture into their organization. Whether you are being challenged by external forces that you don't have any control over, or you think you did a perfect job in building your strategy and yet nobody seems to be moving, all of that is going to benefit from the core of what coaching is about, which is to deepen learning to forward action, building awareness so that we can see more clearly and make better sound decisions. All right. So here's the core tension of presence. Yes, that's a phrase of ours. And that comes from a book I wrote called From Tension to Transformation. And thank you, Mike Rochelle, for your wonderful endorsement of that book. I'm so glad you're here. Competition. It's energizing. Some of you might have been in sports when you were a kid, and maybe you were in music and you went to a music competition, or maybe you were in a choir and you were competing for which seat you got to be or which voice you got to have, or the solo that you wanted. Competition is energizing. It keeps us alert. And if it's unchecked, it creates silos. And this is when we look at engagement scores and we look at things that measure the health of a workplace climate, we can feel the loneliness and the burnout that's associated with unchecked competition. Collaboration, by contrast, is something that fosters innovation for all the reasons we've been already talking about, which is that the organization is not recognizing there are more voices to be heard, seen, understood, and considered on the way to making decisions. When we do that, we're going to get better ideas. This is the whole spirit behind Bell Labs, which I had a great privilege to be at Bell Labs in 1989. At that time, we were unwinding something called 3270 emulation with big, huge mainframes that were super expensive and putting a computer on every person's desk. Collaboration. I didn't know anything about 3270 emulation and distributed computing when I did that project, but I had colleagues that I collaborated with that made that possible. I couldn't have possibly competed with them, but I could compete with myself to be a learner. Now that happens through intention. So what we know is that great leaders, they adjust the ratio between competition and collaboration so that we're always intentionally and dynamically adjusting. What amount of competition, what amount of collaboration meets the moment, the situation, the stage of the project, the size of the team, stage of the organization, where the strategy is. These are all things to synthesize and synergize. How do you do that? No one person ever has that point of view. You do that with input. So we've come full circle back to communication breakdowns. How do we address this? So with that, I'm going to ask Sarah and Steve to know this is your cue to come off mute. And what we'd like to do, all three of us, of course, are generative wholeness practitioners and have been working with leaders and teams and organizations for many years. And we each want to give you a story. And I'd like to set it up like this. Think about your leadership journey. Maybe it's if you're a solo practitioner as a coach, maybe it's your building your business. You're a leader of self and a leader of your business. Some of you are inside of organizations, or like us, you work in organizations. Bring your own example to mind as you're listening to each of our stories so that when we get on the other side of the panel, we can grab some insights from what you might recognize the power of being generative could be for you. All right, so we have a little rock, paper, scissors. I don't know. Steve and Sarah, did you already decide which one of you is going first? They're sick of hearing my voice. They need to hear you for a minute.
I decided Sarah was going first.
Oh, all right. Well, good. So, yeah, so being fourth of five kids, I cut my teeth on competition. And part of the generative wholeness process for me, as I got my coaching education and credentialing, was the relief of appreciating that over the years I had learned how to turn down my competition to be aware of opportunities to collaborate. So now it's almost like a tuning fork when I go to work with an organization, because it's usually just because of market conditions and I think our habits. America is a let's win one against all odds kind of culture. So I do have a bias for looking for this particular tension, because I do feel it's one thing that I really have experienced and see. So this is a pretty fresh story in working with a manufacturing organization on the East Coast, and they were going through some really big changes Their business was intentionally growing, and two of the executives were given a promotion. And one of the people was put in the other executive's place. And this person was very, very competitive. Um, if you read Janet's book, there's a great description on sort of the ultimate competition in the business kind of profile. Well, that's this person, very much so. They wanted to look good. They didn't care if they looked good by disparaging the person who had just been there, who's still on the team, which is kind of a strange one. So they wanted to look better and, look like they're leading better than the predecessor. And we're working on a training guide, a leadership guide, and really their goal was to make it all theirs. They were using I and mine. So first, sort of flag or buzzer going off as far as wholeness and the generative mindset of seeing and perceiving ourselves and others as whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. So working with this client, because fortunately, before they decided to forge forward, they did spend time with their coach. So, we took the pause and started to reflect and really looked at what had changed in the organization. How had the culture evolved? And what was the mission that had been in place prior? And what was the mission that they were agreeing upon as a group and going forward with? So that when this executive started looking and judging, because we all have, if you haven't seen Janet's TED Talk on judgment, we all judge. It's getting judgmental that gets in our way. So as this person started to really look at what had been the previous vision, what had been this predecessor's work, that there was not a whole lot of blame and shame to go around, that it was actually how they had arrived at where they were. And while they had this training piece ready to go and they were ready to dart off, the question arose, what could get created if you collaborated with your predecessor and also with the team itself, asking the team, what are your gaps? What are the pieces of leadership that you're really interested in that would help us in our evolution? And one of the proverbs, which I know this group, if you're here today, you already know it, but it bears repeating. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And what this person found, and they used probably a session and a half working through it, was that when you collaborate, it doesn't go as fast. It's going to go slower. But the depth and the inclusion and the feeling that can happen for the leader themselves and for their predecessor and the team is really taking shape. The story isn't finished yet. It's still in the works. But what I'm an appreciation of was that this leader was willing to shift and take a whole different trajectory with what they were intending to do. And that's where generative wholeness comes in, is to really take it all in. And from this place, rather than right, wrong, good, bad, make some different choices. And that's what I got. So
So stay tuned.
stay tuned. Yes.
What strikes me, Sarah, is the reference to time, that it takes longer. Not all my experience.
Busted.
My experience. And what's interesting is that is what we think. And yet we don't recognize that when we go too fast and are exclusive, we end up having to pick up the pieces. We don't take into account the productivity loss of that, the emotional drain of that, the disengagement that creates. And people say, I ain't going on that team ever again. No way, no how. So now you're not deploying your talent. No wonder we underperformed a potential. It's like pay me now or pay me later, right? Go ahead, Steve. You look like you've got a story to add.
Yes, and that was one of my belief busters right there, is that it takes more time. And that's a firmly held belief by many leaders, that collaboration takes longer. However, I would prefer to have collaboration towards a particular goal that is done one time correctly, which is what I find results. And so I was working with a leader who had a belief, and this is where generative wholeness gets to, what do you believe to be true? That drives your leadership behavior, which eventually gets you the results that you're getting. So what do you believe to be true about competition? I need it in the organization. It is a must have, because that's the way that I get performance. That's the way that people develop, through competition. I have to create an environment where competition exists, which at that point in time in my coaching development, I asked the question of, and what does competition give you in terms of the organizational performance? Because it sounds like the competition is the goal, not the resulting performance from the competition. That was like oh my gosh, I've made creating competition more important than the organizational performance. And so there's this tension between what the leader believed to be true about competition, and there is a place for it.
Right.
With whom are we competing? We're competing with other people in the market. We're not competing with ourselves, with your buddy that sits in the office next to you. So the leadership moment for him was, what is this organization intended to be providing? Back to their business goals, back to their objectives. What have these leaders accepted responsibility for? And in what way have I given them the authority to act on that? That was the team sovereignty model, right? Coming to full swing at that point, to the place of this leader realizing that it was him that was creating all of those things that you saw on the very first chart. It wasn't the people that he was leading. So that's the place of generative wholeness and us as coaches, of creating that awareness for them to then take a look at what is it that I believe to be true as a leader, and what is the way is that driving my behavior, and what might I adopt instead that then gets me the result that I'm looking for.
You know, Steve, it seems to me that one of the things you offer your clients as a person who supports leaders and teams is a space for the humility necessary to admit my behavior is the reason I'm getting the results that I'm getting. And so I salute that in you. It is my experience of you, no matter what you're doing, whether you are, leading a workshop or engaged in delivery of coaching services. And I think this is a piece of it. It's like, how do I admit that I don't know it all? Like, gosh, if we could normalize, I don't know, wouldn't that be amazing?
That would
Our
be
organization.
the first key to development.
Yep. And so, back to what you told us, consistent alignment. What is in the way of consistent alignment? I know a mistake I made when I stopped being the one-armed paper hanger. And the next thing that I did is I thought, when I first told everybody what the strategy was and what our vision for our group was going to be, that was enough. And then somewhere in, I don't know, 1981 or two, I read John Cotter's work on leading change. 5 to 7 years, meaning you have to, as a leader, repeat the vision and the strategy and what your expectation is of others until you can't hardly stand to hear yourself say it. I'm like, oh, this is going to be painful, because I'm one of those renegade people that, I want to say, hey, here, go run. And then I'm on to the next thing. Well, there are a lot of people like me sitting in organizations, and then they wonder, why isn't my team executing? Because it's our job as leaders to create alignment. Take it back to your coaching practice, coaches. When you complain about your clients not doing their homework, or they don't seem to be committed to their own growth and development. Maybe it was us that hasn't come back and let them harvest their progress and claim it and really embody it and then say, let's look at your plan. How are you stepping into more of what you wanted out of that behavior development? When's the last time you asked for feedback? How are you doing on the measures that you set out for yourself? That process of a coach with a leader or a team isn't any different than what a leader is doing with their team and with themselves. And this consistent alignment is a responsibility we have. It is a delegation of authority that we have to be in the role that we're in. We have to accept responsibility to keep coming back to it, not take it for granted that the first time we've said something, somebody's going to bloody remember it.
And Janet, I think there's a self-reflection process that spans all of those roles, right? Of how was my day today, and in what way did I contribute to what happened, and what might I have done different, and what would, so there's that reflection as both a coach, as a practitioner, as a leader of intention, with intention, having that reflection.
We're going to pick up on that next month, by the way, Leadership Pause. We hope you'll come back and see us on April 24th, because one of the things I found is that leaders don't really know how to reflect. We say that word like we know what it means. There are some very specific skills to reflection if it's going to create opportunity for you. So I want to pause here, and you guys are all welcome to leave your mics open, by the way. You won't bother us if the doorbell rings, doesn't matter. What I'm interested in is there anyone that's been stimulated by what you heard from Sarah and Steve and me before we started the panel? Maybe a scenario you're in or a question that's on your mind. The floor is yours. You might raise your hand for me just so we don't all talk at once. Samaya, I love seeing your smile.
Jump in here and tag on to what you were just saying, Janet, because I do. I think it's very interesting that I'm a coach, and as I got exceptional training at inviteCHANGE, yay for coaching, and then have been in practice for the last 15 years. Can't believe it. I do often invite myself to check in with some assumptions that I might be carrying, like this whole concept of, oh, if I just talk to the leader about reflecting, then I'm sure they will, and they'll move through a practice and a process that will yield something beneficial. Because I can't assume that. Leaders have traveled many pathways to get to where they are, and some of them would really, benefit from us unpacking what that actually is, because it is a skill and a practice, like you said, to be able to yield something productive, something that helps them feel like that slowing down and pausing, which is counterintuitive in the world that many of these folks are traveling in. So they need to understand that there actually could be something beneficial that comes out of this. Oh gosh, tell me more. How do I get that right? How do I, really maximize this opportunity to slow down and get something worthwhile out of it, if it's actually going to feed and help me nurture my team, my organization, my customers, because we need to keep moving forward. So I think there's an incredible gift that coaches can give leaders, because we often are creating that consistent, sacred, confidential space to help them create the pause and to learn skills like reflection, conversation, inviting that self-awareness to keep growing, to serve them well in all that they're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. And as you said, in the safety of that space, that's where the vulnerability comes in, where, leaders carry this big persona, don't ever let them see you sweat. Like, but wait, I sweat. And I think you said something else really important here, which is that we take for granted that because somebody is successful, they know how they got there.
Yes.
They don't. Generative wholeness came out of our research. I started asking successful leaders, do you know how you got here? How do you sustain it? And they couldn't answer. Well, I get paid for producing results. Okay. How do you do that? How do you produce results? And they couldn't answer it. So I got curious and kept asking questions, and the capacities of learning that activate imagination to do original thinking, which is where innovation comes from, and the discipline then to experiment, just like the guys in Bell Labs, to create something that the market might actually like. Learn, originate, and create are all part of being generative. It's not just producing results and doing it over and over and over again. And all of those require connection, communication, and collaboration. All right, Suli, have you got a story too? You're on mute still.
Yep. Now, I
There you
was just going to share that some of the leaders that I was privileged to coach and work with came from old school thought form processing.
Mhm.
And it's not only that they end up doing it, but they never led the team or participated on brainstorming. That was delegated to the team leader. So to me, that was a big disconnect. And expecting results without really participating caused so much more time-consuming problems and
Yes.
misalignment and disconnects than if that leader, that CEO, would participate with the director or the team leader and have maybe a month communication with them to just check in to see where the ideas came in, and especially when you're talking about multicultural team participants, and the lack of the leader understanding the beauty of a different thought perspective, thought process, innovative, creative, got into it, intuitive solutions that could have never happened if it was no collaboration. So yeah, first they have to learn not only to reflect, they have to learn, or they have to realize that their own style may be causing the issues. And as coaches, we create a safe space for them to be vulnerable so that they can start to reflect on themselves. And it's up to us to really hold them on that and challenge them, because that's where they are. They are where they are because they have faced so many challenges, and they respect you from a different perspective.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to share.
And flip the penny, Suli. Beautiful story. That's exactly right. Teams make assumptions about their leaders and what they are and are not available to have a conversation about, and to begin to see where they have more alignment than they might have assumed. And I didn't really pay her to do this, but you did a perfect setup for me. Because I also want to get us on our way to having you have an opportunity to play with this a little bit. I get the question often about our logo down here in the lower right. What the heck does that mean? And it's this opening piece that I want to give you context around. These are the shifts in mindset and behavior that work. If you want to bring teams and their leaders into a much more generative space. The first one is moving from I know best to we create the best. There's always an I inside the we. The leader doesn't lose their identity or their authority or their influence and impact in the organization and in the world simply by empowering a team to join them in that process. And neither, there's always a we within the I. When we are able to recognize as a team member, I have colleagues that I can lean into, that they'll have my back and I'll have their back when we find ourselves in situations where we might not be in our wheelhouse, but we're open to learning with each other and we've made those agreements. There's a lot more where that came from. But one of the things that's so important is that we realize none of us understands what's expected to be delivered by this team if we're not engaged in active conversation with each other and helping that come to life from each of our perspectives. Zuli, this is really what you're speaking about, that leader needed to learn how to do that. So 3 things, just 3. I know the human brain loves 3, so that's what you're getting. More where this came from. But the first one is to move from telling to asking. I was with we have a corporation that's in their 3rd round of sending their executive leaders through coach certification. So fun to watch these leaders have light bulbs go on. And one of them was saying to the CHRO, I'm really well respected as a leader in this organization. But having gone through this program, I realized I was doing it all wrong. I had no idea what coaching was. And today he's learned how to ask before tell. And the next shift is to stop teaching and do more learning. And in this case, not learning more expertise, but learning what is the expertise that lives here and how might I configure the way this expertise is deployed for us to not only produce what we know, but also to activate the conversations that will identify what we don't yet know that will be the next greatest idea for our customers. Maybe everybody's figured out large language data models, information models, knowledge models are now accessible in the palm of your hand, and needing to be an expert is really far less important. What's more important is how do you make meaning out of the access to it and deploy it in a way that's unique and expressive? That's a learning process, not a teaching process. And ultimately, Suli's leader is a good example of ignoring. No, I've delegated that to the team leader and the team. Go forth, be good, deliver results. At what point did that leader stop accepting responsibility for the authority they granted to that team? About the time they granted it. And they missed noticing where the team was misaligned, where they were missing information, where they felt unloved because nobody was paying attention to what they were doing. We all want to be acknowledged, but this is a core skill. Just because we've delegated doesn't absolve us of responsibility to stay connected. So from telling to asking, from teaching to learning, and from ignoring to noticing. Those are 3. If you only take that away, those are 3 shifts to work on for yourself and for leaders. And of course, I'm a fan of tension. And I'm not a fan of conflict management. Those of you that know me know this. If we've gotten all the way to conflict, by golly, we stopped noticing a long time ago, and we let something fester and get to the point where people are personal with each other, and it's very destructive. I guarantee you, the tension of that conflict was known way earlier, and we ignored it. So this is a lot of what we talk about in the book, From Tension to Transformation. And this tension of collaboration and competition is but one example of 7 very common ones that happen inside of organizations. So we're going to do a little bit of a breakout. But let me see here. Does anybody know about social exchange theory? Any of my PhD friends in the room, social exchange theory? Okay. 1959, the year I was born, a couple of really smart guys by the name of, I need to always look this up here, Thibault and Kelly. They noticed that people try to maximize the rewards they obtain from a relationship. Maximize the rewards they obtain from a relationship and minimize the costs. What they called the min-max principle. I think they knew about tensions of presence. What do you think? According to social exchange theory, people will pursue relationships where the rewards are greater than the cost. Sounds a little bit like net profit in a business. And they'll abandon those relationships where the costs are greater than the profit, net loss. Then they're measured short-term and cumulatively. And I think this is the big piece we're talking about here. Leaders who think this is a one-off with this team that's not performing, or it's a one-off with this leader who's not performing, is not realizing that the leader had been performing. Something in the system is creating this, and it has become too costly for that leader or that team to stay engaged. Don't take the bait when a leader says they're the problem. And you see that finger pointing out, that's your time to get more deeply curious, to say, what's going on in the system? I don't think we're seeing the whole picture here. So I love the way that these researchers frame this. And yes, I am a little bit of a geek, I will admit to it. But this language I thought was quite good, which is interaction breeds sentiment. How I experience, Steve used the term intention. What is the emotional feeling? What is the physical sensation I have when I'm in your company? How many of you walked into a room for a team meeting, and you could, what's the phrase we use? You could cut the emotional field with a knife. It's so thick.
And
Or
heavy.
and heavy. Oh. It's like you want to fall asleep in the meeting, right? Because there's just so much in the field. Yeah. Interaction breeds sentiment, which means the lack of interaction breeds sentiment too. And this is the crisis we have right now. If you have any HBR readers, Harvard Business Review readers, there's a brand new book out that's talking all about the loneliness and mental health crisis we have in business everywhere on the planet. That's what this is talking about. We have a breakdown in our social exchange theory and its application day to day. So I think you have something in your chat. Is it there yet?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, so in your chat, you have something called a Generative Leaders Playbook. It's a gift for you, but please download it because you'll use it in the breakout rooms. And 2 questions that you get to answer. You'll see that there's a little bit of a survey inside in 3 areas. Listening for what's not said. And you'll have a chance to rate yourself. What's happening now for you? Now, you can either do this because you are a leader and you have a team, or you're working in an organization of any size, or you could do it as a practitioner who's working with leaders and teams. You decide. It doesn't matter. The both are relevant. What's happening now? And then you'll have an opportunity to explore, what shift will you choose? Is it about asking rather than telling? Is it about perhaps learning, not teaching? Is it about noticing as opposed to ignoring? And you'll have a place to capture your answers. So listening for what's not said is one section. A second about fostering resilience, which is learning to navigate tension. And the third is creating psychological safety. All right, I'm going to set up random triads. So when you get in your breakout room, do what you want to do that feels your favorite way. Let's do it that way. Your favorite way of connecting. One room? I don't want one room. Hold on. Your favorite way of connecting, and allow yourself to, let's see. Allow yourself to maybe exchange a value, or maybe what's been the most valuable thing that you have been able to pause, hold that thought. Hamad, could you look at why the breakout rooms are only letting me create one room?
You'll have to make me co-host.
Okay, I can do that. Think about the most important thing that has happened in this conversation so far. Where are you feeling activated, interested in some way? All right, here we go. And you're all set. So while we are troubleshooting breakout rooms, go ahead and download the Generative Leaders Playbook. And the first 2 questions to answer on your own start on page 2. So page 2, page 3, and page 4. Go ahead and start that personally so that when you enter into your triads, then you can have some discussion. And before you leave the breakout rooms, support each other in identifying What is one shift that you'll choose in the next 90 days based on what the data told you?
All right, I am ready.
And it looks like, oh, there. Thanks, Shannon. You got it. Okay, go ahead and open the breakout rooms.
Okay, we're gonna do about 20 minutes.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay.
About learning from him, you know. I think I learned from his experience too, and that was what was especially wonderful about it.
Beautiful, beautiful modeling of that's exactly what collaboration does. 1 + 1
Yeah,
makes more than 2.
yeah. More than two. That's good.
And what does that inspire you to commit to as a shift you want to make in the next 90 days?
Well, I couldn't finish with all the PDF because we were working on it and time was up. But I don't know, I realized as a reflection on myself, for example, that I haven't been doing supervision lately. I kind of time passed and I haven't done it. And so when the question appeared, what have you, I said, oh my God, I need to do something there, you know, that was one thing that popped out. Then other things to reflect about silence and tension. Personally, for me, it is very, very easy to keep silence and to work and ask questions with my silence. I am very strong at that. And what I find is that when I'm working with other people, they get nervous and they start popping in. They don't let the time go. And well, I noticed that for me, tension it's something that it's like I was comparing it to mistakes. You know, when mistakes happen, you have information there that you can use to ask questions, right? It's,
Yes.
perceptions, even in the attitudes, the way people are sitting or whatever it is that you can ask so that you can start releasing. And that this tension is going to have a lot of information as well as mistakes too. Let's say first in life, I learned to work with mistakes. They say, okay, I embrace mistakes because mistakes are my guidelines to improve. Or I always recommend my coaches to, okay, embrace your mistakes, love them, write them down. They have a lot of information. You got your solution there. And now I feel the same about tension.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I have always felt in the agile world that we kind of missed a huge opportunity by calling it fail fast. It ought to be learn fast. Experiment to learn fast. Experiment, experiment, experiment. I mean, Thomas Edison, we got electricity because of it. Right? You know,
Right.
and it was very interesting in that Bell Labs article. 1924 was when we did the first statistical process modeling, which is the precedent to Six Sigma, to Steve's story about do it right the first time. Well, the only way we can do that is that we've done the learning to know what not to do. So mistakes are critical to actually getting to good quality.
Exactly.
Wow, now that's a reframe for our leaders, don't you think?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Alejandra. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Jump in. I really appreciated that my self-reflection was very powerful because it helped kind of connect me with some of the decisions that I've made, especially as I incorporated my coach training into some of my other professional experience, started my own business, and then started stepping into all of these different worlds that my clients are traveling in, and made some very deliberate choices about how I wanted to use silence, how I wanted to be able to invite a diversity of perspective, so that together, whether it was with my team or with my clients, that I was practicing role modeling and learning from a very active dynamic of using different conversational elements like silence and like inviting feedback to really be part of my norm. And it was great to hear from my fellow group participants too, that as they were sharing additional perspective and what came up for them, that really bubbled up these wonderful themes of intentionality, where we decide to bring our presence, listening into people's language if they're coming from an I-centric or a we-centric space, and how that informs how we can then, connect with them, co-create with them, or potentially need to recalibrate something with them, depending upon what it is that we're trying to work through together and be collaborative with them.
Yeah.
So thank you to my group for such a rich discussion about that, because it really added such additional dimension to my reflection. And thank you, Janet, and your team for the powerful guide and the questions that elicited that experience to come forward.
Pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for the seriousness with which you let yourself drop into it. You really all encouraged, you can use this with teams to help them open up a conversation with you about how you all want to be together, right? These are human skills. Yes, they come out of the 30-year history now of organized coaching through the ICF. And they ultimately are about how do we be better humans together. Silence is that tricky one because we're so rewarded for figuring things out and then sharing it with other people, right? Since we were little kids, we've been told, study hard and then share what you know and then apply it and keep applying it and get better. That's the mantra. And yet there's so much to be heard and experienced when there is silence.
And one of the things we touched on too with that, Janet, is that because silence sometimes can trigger people into a place of discomfort because they feel like they're being tested. Or sometimes we've all been on the other end of the experience when someone has used silence to reflect that there is something very seriously wrong and we need to fix it. That an incredible opportunity to not only understand our own relationship with silence and all the different ways that we can use it, but also be very thoughtful and considerate about how it can be interpreted by our conversational partners. And how we hold our, the intention and presence again is part of what creates the energy of how that silence is either being something that is offered as a space to listen to what else needs to be heard or said, or, it has, as it's being, gently held in a space of, nobody in this room has the answer. That's cool. That's to be expected. We are meant to be innovating about something right now. So, sharing that silence with people, because you're gifting each other the space to process with all your different learning styles, communication styles, etc., to be respectful with the silence, to honor a process that is wanting to unfold in service to what you may be working on together. So I think that's another piece of it too that kind of was an interesting dimension to think about. What does silence mean? How are you holding it? How are you gifting it?
And so if we go back to the definition of accountability, accepting responsibility for authority granted, when a team makes agreements about, for example, I have a team that everyone has permission to call for a timeout. Right? If the conversation is going around the mulberry bush, they're not getting anywhere. That's a moment to just say, okay, let's just take a pause. And that person can say, what occurs to me in the silence is this, and I have this question for the team. So they work this through to realize that they have a habit, maybe a little bit of a preference to just go in their conversation, and they miss things as a result, and they don't hear each other as well. So it came a little bit over time, but they built the agreements that let them be able to accept responsibility for attending to the health of their interaction field, right? Interaction breeds sentiment. Do it intentionally. It's going to happen anyway. So you might as well set it up to operate in your favor. Yeah, beautiful. Anybody else? All
You
right.
touched on, you touched on, what do you call it? Teaming agreements. I think
Uh-huh.
our group also talked about the shared purpose that sometimes in the either pontification as one tech group was just going off on every potential tangent, moving further away, and by the end talking themselves out of any idea at all. If the purpose was to come together, bring ideas, and create the pathway to actualize that idea, how does forgetting the shared purpose impact the outcome?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Even sometimes, Sarah, to your point, the shared purpose is no longer the shared purpose. I've had teams who realize that they've been operating under an old shared purpose, and so much has changed that's influencing how they're operating, and they haven't stopped to take stock. So this question of intentional is so important. I want to do a little bit of summarizing here about what you might have heard, and I hope you enjoy my metaphor. I was talking to an old friend that I have not seen in 2 decades, and she gave me this morning when I was describing to her what we were going to do in this master class. And I said, what we're doing is awakening people to put the pause on habit and preference, assumption and bias, and ask themselves, if you're noticing that something does not align right now, it's not coherent for you, you're not feeling in stride or in flow with your colleagues, the project's not moving the way you want it to, that's the moment to pause and awaken. And so be the alarm clock with no snooze button, to continue to be paying attention. The first step, of course, is awareness, recognizing where your current leadership habits are rooted in control rather than trust. You can hear the commentary in your head. If that person would just please do this. Okay, hang on. How am I part cause or agent of the reason the person's not just doing this? And understanding that those are default responses. And if we let them operate without our intention, they are going to limit the team's potential. Application. Use real world team dynamics to practice a new generative response. Don't make this up out of a book or just because you heard 3 or 4 stories from us today. Use your stories, your teams, your real context, and start to experiment with more of a trust-led leadership that opens up the dialogue because you're asking to learn. Of course, embodiment. None of this just in your head makes it stick. It's got to get down into your body. It has to be the thing you practice. So transforming your approach at that level of identity. What do you think you're supposed to do as a manager or a leader of people or teams? Leading from presence, from curiosity, from shared ownership. Doing that consistently and consciously. Easy to say, it's a practice. And integration, of course, sustaining the shift by embedding some new habits. If anybody wants a habit change tool, just put a note, habit change in the chat, and I'm happy to send that to you afterwards. And work through the discomfort. You know, a little bit of discomfort is good. Like those of you that have gotten married know what it felt like to either stand at the altar or walk towards it. It was a little uncomfortable and a little nerve-wracking to a joyous occasion. And frankly, hasn't that always been true? The things that we put a little discomfort in place to stretch into something we know we're longing for. As leaders, we create those environments for collaborative culture to become the norm. So awareness, application, embodiment, integration, that's a generative process, what I just put there for you. And ultimately, here's the 4 things that we hope you're taking away today. Not by pushing harder. Instead, listening fuller is the key to getting creative and operational potential. To build a collaborative culture where innovation's an initiative isn't an initiative, it's a natural outcome of the communication that you're having. That when you feel the tension, when you notice that there is friction, you don't have a friction-free flow going in the conversation, pause and ask yourself, where are we in the ratio of competition and collaboration, and bring that conversation into the space. And of course, modeling the kind of presence and mindset that elevates everyone around you. There's always a we within your I, and you are always an I within their we, whether you pause to ask them about it or not. It's happening. It is the nature of humanity. So be generative. The future of leadership really is intentional collaboration, and future-ready leaders are the ones who have generative capacity. They're generating capacity. They are allowing their group to generate their own capacity. That's how you keep winning and scale inside your organizations. So where do we go from here? You've seen what's possible. It's now time for you to make it real. Of course, we're always available to support that. And that way that we do that is on a wide range of products. There's coaching for individuals and for teams. There are educational experiences. We'll keep doing these master classes the rest of the year. I'm much more interested in people finding resource to be more effective in their work. If we haven't brought something that you found useful, let us know what it is, and we'll bring it the next time. These are typical kinds of programs that are available: leaders, principles of generative conversation. How do you begin to model at the top of the house what it is like to ask before tell, to learn rather than teach, and to notice and not ignore the signals that tension might be brewing in your organization? That's all in the path of becoming a generative leader. And of course, putting those skills into practice for yourself and for your teams. And many of the organizations we serve are putting their leaders through coach certification, because that is the beginning of a coach-centered culture. And let's have a conversation. I would enjoy that. You can scan this piece here. It's free. You can talk to Sarah or Steve. All three of us would be happy, as well as Lori Johnson. I think Lori's somewhere on the screen. Yes, I see you now. Doesn't cost you anything to have a conversation, and it'll keep you connected to the work. If there is something that has been stimulated tonight, today, this morning, wherever you are on the planet, we'd love to have that conversation. We're all about shaping a world where people love their life's work through generative wholeness. And I have a little poll that I would love to give you, and then we'll just open the floor for general questions. And I haven't done this before, so bear with me. Let's see if it works. What are you seeing? Are you guys seeing questions?
Yes,
Yes.
collaboration,
Now we
Codex
are, yes.
masterclass. How likely?
I did it.
It worked. I did a poll. I did my first poll.
Congratulations.
Thank you. See, old dogs can learn new tricks.
Of course.
Even if you're not a dog or a trick.
I don't know. I have discovered in our neighborhood that as a result of the pandemic, I think we are the only house that does not yet own an animal. They're everywhere. So I feel like I'm in the pack of dogs all the time. It's all good. I love them.
I just became a puppy owner about a month ago, Janet.
Oh, wow.
And she just joined me in my office.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yay.
And her name is
Izzy.
Izzy.
Yeah.
Izzy.
She has just absolutely lit up my whole family from the inside out with her playfulness and love and just her spirit. It's just been such a breath of fresh air. And my son just turned 12. And
Oh, I can't believe that.
I know, isn't that wild? I'm
Goodness.
the mother of a middle schooler. But he's been talking about a puppy for a long time. And we've talked as a family about, what this kind of responsibility can bring into our lives. And we've welcomed it, but we just wanted to align the right timing. And
Yeah.
it was well worth the wait because she's been the perfect addition to our family. So
Another leadership lesson, having a conversation about the right timing for making that allocation of time and attention and love.
exactly.
So floor is open. Follow-up questions that might be on your mind of things we covered today, something you thought you might get here and I didn't cover it, and you'd like to put it on the table.
For me, it's only to say thank you, really.
Enjoyed to have you here.
Let us reflect with you and learn.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Come back and see us again.
Okay, I will.
They said not February. Brain. April. See, I want to go back to February. I don't want the first quarter to be done. In April on the 26th, same time, 12 to 2. And we're going to explore leadership pause. I briefly mentioned that earlier. And one of the things that was very profound for me as I was doing the research for the second book was how much guilt leaders carry because they don't take enough time to wonder about how they got where they are. On a project, we do after action reviews, but we do them with a stick. What went wrong? How do we make sure we don't do that again? As opposed to, what led me to the decision that I made? What were we aligning with? What did we believe? What did I see? What did I dismiss about all of that? Where were my biases, assumptions, preferences, and habits getting in my way? And what is it that I want to give more conscious attention to so that we do it differently next time? Giving the agency back to ourselves through that reflection process, and discovered they really had no idea how. Right? They could think about it, but they actually didn't have the practices for reflection. So we'll dive into that a little bit more and some scenarios. And again, I have another 3 coaches in our system who are going to bring some specific applications. And we'll do some kind of a creative breakout. I haven't designed it yet, but something. Thank you for passing the word along to others. We have an open space for co-learning together. And anybody else? Question, comment?
Comment, it's April 23rd.
Oh,
The 26th is a Saturday, so somebody inquired and I checked, it's the 23rd. So if everybody heard but didn't see the chat, 23rd.
so that you all know, I have dyslexia and I often look at the calendar and go, oh, but I'm sure it's not that date.
I understand.
Wednesday the 23rd. Thank you. See, it takes a team.
It does. It does.
Carol, you look like you're noodling on something. Am I misreading you?
No. I am directing my focus after a very long day and zooming down the highway to get indoors after a full day. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll give you back the gift of time. Thank you so much for being here, and you know where to find us. I've noticed that Lori had put some information in the chat for you here. Janet.harvey@invitechange.com. And I love connecting and furthering your work, and I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
Go well, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.